And welcome to another episode of iCritic Live. This is where we talk about movies, pop culture, and life in between. I'm your host, Kevin, and thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we have a couple of guests today for a three-way discussion panel for our topic today. The first one is the person we always love to have over, Rachel from Rachel's Reviews. How are you doing?
Howdy.
Howdy. And we've got a newcomer on our show. Her name is Tracy from the podcast Tune My Heart, which is fairly new, but I personally like it quite a bit. Say hi, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. Now, so to understand our backgrounds a little, me and Rachel consider ourselves film critics. I don't know if Tracy considers herself a film critic, but her podcast is where she takes animated features and she looks for, biblical life lessons you can take from those animated features, which means she takes animation very seriously, much like we do. Me and Rachel say that animated movies are cinema. Actually, in my written reviews, I don't even list animation or anime as the genre. It's like when I wrote my review Suzumi, it was a fantasy movie. It wasn't an anime. It was a fantasy movie. So, and we always like to have fellow animation fans who take animation seriously join us. Now, today, we have a very interesting topic. This is actually not a new topic per se, but it's one that gets a lot of discussion every time Oscar season comes around. Oscar season is done, but with Suzumi already getting really early props for being Oscar worthy, it might be time to kind of discuss it. So, the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. Will this look better? Actually, this will look a little better. Why not? Now, the Best Animated Feature Award was created in the year 2001, where after many decades of animation contributing to some of the greatest cinematic achievements of all time, they had not actually won too many significant awards. In fact, prior to this award being created and the expansion of 5 to 10 Best Picture nominees, only one film had been nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, which was Beauty and the Beast. And with all due respect to Silence of the Lambs, which was a very good movie, I think Beauty and the Beast should have won. The Golden Globes did a little better at treating animation as a legitimate art form because they have their own separate musical or comedy category. And so movies like Aladdin and Shrek and Chicken Little and Finding Nemo could be nominated in the Best Picture category, and movies like The Lion King would win, and Toy Story 2 would win. So the Academy created this award to highlight the artistic achievements on what animation brought to cinema. And since then, there has been a lot of debate on whether or not that award actually has accomplished anything it has set out to do. Now then, before we start talking about, oops, that was a mistake. Sorry, ladies. How did I do that before? There we go. Before we start talking about the award itself, I guess here's the first question. I don't know how much of an Oscar watcher you are, Tracy. I know Rachel, we did our Oscar special together. But before 2001, are there some notable animated films you can think of that maybe should have been considered for Best Picture at the Academy Awards? We'll start with Rachel, since I know you're my little Oscar pundit.
I think there's a lot. Almost every year, I think there could be an animated film that is worthy of consideration at the very least. The one that I thought of just kind of right away is Toy Story. I think they pretty much admitted that it should have been nominated for Best Picture by giving it an honorary award for achievement.
Right.
I mean, I feel like that's basically saying they nominated for screenplay, they nominated for score, and so
it was the first animated film to get a screenplay nomination.
Yeah. And so then you look at the movies that were nominated for Best Picture that year. So Braveheart won, which is a good movie, but
yeah, that's a good movie.
Doesn't have nearly the cultural impact of Toy Story, not even close. Amy and Paul Tuchin, another good movie. So I would be fine with that. Babe is a movie I love. Il Postino, I've never seen it. I can't comment on it. And Sense Sensibility, I do love. But I just feel like even out of all those, some pretty good year, I would say. I still think that the groundbreaking film that it was, the impact of course they wouldn't know, but the impact that it would go on to have, the quality of the movie, the quality of the script, I think that it should have been one of those 5.
Right. Well, just to comment, as someone who has seen Il Postino, and Il Postino is a very good movie, I would say that I would swap out Il Postino and put Toy Story there for Best Picture if I was picking 5. Tracy, is there a particular movie that you in the past thought like, why wasn't that a Best Picture nominee?
Well, there were 2 that I thought of off the top of my head. Toy Story is a great, I don't know why that didn't occur to me. But the 2 that came straight to my mind are The Lion King, because again, that was such a phenomenon. And the other one is The Prince of Egypt, which is just, gorgeous in every way. That, beautiful music, beautiful animation, a beautiful story. It's, it's a biblical epic, right there with 10 Commandments. I mean, there have been legitimate arguments made that it's better than the 10 Commandments, which I would agree with.
I would actually argue the Prince of Egypt is better than the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, I would agree as well.
Absolutely.
The year of Lion King was a pretty good year, but
it was a tough year.
I mean, because you've got Pulp Fiction, you've got Shawshank Redemption, you have Forrest Gump winning, Quiz Show, and 4 Weddings and a Funeral. But I mean,
and this is really tough because theoretically any of these could have won. Now, normally I would have swapped out 4 Weddings and a Funeral for The Lion King. On the other hand, there was also another movie that year that I felt was so wrongfully snubbed, and that was Hoop Dreams. So it's one of those where it's like, even though I could see The Lion King becoming a Best Picture contender,
not even for documentaries, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like that was such a tough year. That's one of those years where it's like you almost throw a dart at the movie.
The documentary branch, though, is very unreliable, in my opinion.
Now, as for The Prince of Egypt, which I believe came out in 1997, the big winner that year was Titanic. And other nominees were As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, and LA Confidential. That's a tough one. I guess I could swap out The Full Monty for The Prince of Egypt. Maybe that wouldn't be a bad swap in my opinion. But again, you have 5 really strong movies there, and in all fairness, nothing was beating Titanic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about winning, but
but just being nominated.
If I was gonna say that 2 movies from like the 90s deserve to be nominated, it would have been those 2 off the top of my head. And then you think about, you were talking about Toy Story getting an honorary award. I think Roger Rabbit did as well.
Yeah.
Which obviously is not totally animation, but I mean, it was groundbreaking.
Well, and it's really funny because my first choice, on why did this not get a Best Picture nominee? Who Framed Roger Rabbit? I mean, yeah, it's a mix, but it's not only was it a stunning technical achievement that still holds up, but the fact that it's good.
Yeah.
And it came out in 1988, and you look at these nominees, and the funny thing is, and again, these are pretty good movies too. Rain Man, The Accidental Tourist, Dangerous Liaisons, Mississippi Burning, Working Girl. They're all good movies, but I would say Roger Rabbit was better than all of them, and it could theoretically have replaced any of those 5 movies.
I guess I've seen Rain Man. I don't think I've seen. But the 80s are a murky period when it comes to the Oscars. It is not a strong decade, in my opinion. Amadeus is the exception, but a lot of kind of mediocre movies, in my opinion.
The 80s was a little weird. How does Out of Africa beat The Color Purple? I mean, come on. But yeah, you look at 1988, and it was like, and Roger Rabbit got 6 Oscar nominations plus that honorary award, and it's like that was more than some of the Best Picture nominees themselves got. So it was kind of like, why did that not get nominated? Another one that I would personally nominate, even though I know that it really didn't have much of a shot, was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's my personal favorite Disney movie, even though I acknowledge Beauty and the Beast is the best one they made.
Yeah.
I would easily swap out Shine or Jerry Maguire for The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Again, these are all
like Jerry Maguire hasn't really aged that well. We all loved it at the time, but
I like Jerry Maguire. I've never seen Shine, so
I still like Jerry Maguire. I don't know.
But do you like it as like a Best Picture?
I don't love Hunchback, so I can't be with you on that one.
Right, that's fine. Well, Jerry Maguire is like, it's almost kind of a simple film for a Best Picture nominee.
Exactly.
I will say.
I just get happy whenever romantic comedies are like invited to the party, because I feel like as a genre, it's kind of a lot of times dismissed.
Yeah. Jerry Maguire does have some memorable lines. It has good chemistry with Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger. So yeah, maybe it deserves to be there. I don't know. It's like, it is funny when there's 5 nominees. There's very few times that you see something that's like, well, that just clearly shouldn't be there. But I'll list one more that probably clearly should have been there, and it wasn't. In 1999, where's Toy Story 2? It's better than American Beauty. It's clearly better than Cider House Rules. It's better than The Green Mile. It's probably not as good as The Insider or The Sixth Sense, but there are 3 average movies there with one. In my opinion, American Beauty is the worst film to win Best Picture ever.
I don't care for it at
I do
all.
not like
and
that
I
movie
always,
at all.
even before, even back then, I didn't like it. It's not, not just a Kevin Spacey thing. I just thought it was so pretentious with the plastic bag floating through the air.
And then the weird thing is that same year, Magnolia was released by Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
And I mean, it had the same pretentiousness about people, but it was so much better. And dare I even say it even had like a biblical undertone at the end of the day. And
I don't love Magnolia, so I can't go with you 100%, but it's better than American Beauty. I'll give you
I love Magnolia, and it was like, why did they pick American Beauty over that?
I do agree that's better than
Yep. And this is the year that the Golden Globes gave Toy Story 2 Best Comedy or Musical. So it's like, it was in the conversation. Why wasn't it there?
Yeah.
So now I guess the first question is, what? It's like the Academy obviously started the animated feature category because we're looking through this list, and it's like, well, we're seeing that animation is just not getting nominated, even though it probably should have been. Was that the best solution at the time to, well, the voters aren't voting for it, we want to honor it, so let's create its own separate category? Did that, in principle, was that a good idea?
I think so. It's just, they've proven over so many years that they weren't going to nominate animated films for Best Picture. And so I feel like it's it's an imperfect solution, but I think it's a solution. And it has been a way to introduce a wider audience to more independent animation that, that people wouldn't have seen. I think if you look at the Cartoon Saloon films, Tom Moore his Irish trilogy, I don't think that those would have gotten near as much exposure if they hadn't had the animated Oscar nominations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It might be an imperfect solution, but I think being able to recognize several animated movies as nominees every year is better than maybe once in a while throwing them a crumb of maybe you'll get a Best Picture nomination, which is just, very rare. And I don't think that not having the animated category would change that.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's unfortunate that they're still so biased in what they nominate, that we've only had we've only had one non-Studio Ghibli anime film get nominated.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Which is ridiculous.
That's its own little category.
The anti-anime bias. But I still think in the end it's been a good thing for for the medium overall.
Okay.
Overall. There's
Overall.
still been some things like the insulting introduction from a couple years ago where it was
I probably want to talk about that a little bit at great
separately.
length too. But so I'll throw out just a couple more things before we move on to the award itself. Gregory Peck, Mr. Atticus Finch himself, tried and unsuccessfully campaigned for The Jungle Book to be a Best Picture nominee in 1967. It was not nominated, but the Academy decided to nominate Dr. Dolittle.
Why did he? Because he's not in that movie.
Because he just loved the movie.
Good for him.
He really loved it, and he said, "I think we should nominate The Jungle Book for Best Picture," and he encouraged Academy voters to do that. They could find room for Dr. Dolittle, but not to The Jungle Book.
Well, and what won that year?
In the Heat of the Night, which is a pretty good movie.
That is
another animated film that I thought would have been a great Best Picture nominee was Fantasia.
Oh, absolutely.
Such a unique... It's still one of the most unique things you'll ever see.
For Best Picture, is that voted on by the Academy members, or is it determined by committee? Because some of the Oscars are determined by committee, the noms.
So Best Picture, everyone who's a member can vote for Best Picture.
What, vote for it, but determine the nominees?
Yeah, yes.
Or is that decided by committee?
Yeah, no. So all the categories are decided by committee except for Best Picture. That one everybody can vote for. And then when the nominees are selected, then everyone can vote in all the categories.
Right.
So there was opportunity for people to recognize The Jungle Book or Fantasia or even Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which the funny thing was it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, but it's like the Academy kind of acknowledged that, yeah, this is one of the best things we've done. So we're going to give Walt Disney a regular statuette with 7 little miniature statuettes. If you haven't seen that Oscar, it's on display at the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. It's a really cool looking statue.
Yeah.
So all right. So Best Picture, basically a bust for animation. And instead, they create this animated feature category. And we're not going to go over every single year individually, just for the record. But it's always interesting to see what the first year looked like. Because you know what they say about first impressions. And for the first impressions, the 3 nominees were Shrek, Monsters, Inc., and Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius from Nickelodeon. So I'm gonna say as a first impression, it was kind of like, well, it's a start. I personally believe Shrek deserved to be a Best Picture nominee. Monsters, Inc. was definitely good. Jimmy Neutron was never good. And it has not held up. And you're wondering why movies like Atlantis, The Lost Empire isn't there instead, which might not have won, but seems to be a little bit better at the very least. Tracy, I'm going to go to you first because I kind of know Rachel's opinion on it. What do you think of when you see this first lineup? And with your first impression, would you think that this is a successful launch of a legitimate award?
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking it up the other day after you contacted me about this, I was surprised by Jimmy Neutron. I mean, I found that humorous. I've honestly never seen Jimmy Neutron, so I can't weigh in. It might be amazing.
It's not.
I highly doubt it.
It's really not.
So, I mean, it's very interesting that, for so many years, if this award had existed before, it would have been the Disney Award, right?
Right.
It would have just automatically gone to them. And now the award is finally created and there's not a Disney film there.
Because technically, we don't consider Pixar Disney. Pixar is their own studio.
Yeah, I mean, you could quibble with that. At this point, Disney owns everything, so...
They do, but especially back then, Pixar was the brain trust and Disney was the sugar daddy. They went to Disney for money and not a whole lot else.
Yeah, very much so. And so Yeah, it's definitely an interesting trio of movies there. It almost feels like they created the category just
Oh, oh,
like, well, Shrek is really good. It deserves, but we don't want to give it a big Best Picture nomination. Let's finally create this category and give it that.
yeah, but they also gave Shrek a a best adapted screenplay nomination, which actually I would agree with even if I didn't love Shrek, because I'm pretty sure no one here has read the Shrek book. Has anyone here read Shrek?
I haven't read it all the way through, but I've seen,
It's
pages of it. It
it's
doesn't look great.
It's an extremely average book. Like, there is nothing memorable about it at all, and they definitely did something with it. So that's worthy of a nomination alone. So I don't know. So Rachel, like, I know what you feel about it, but share in case everyone doesn't know. What do you think about the inaugural year?
I haven't watched the Jimmy Neutron since I did the video, so it's been years. It seemed like it was harmless, but nothing too special.
Well, it was harmless.
Yeah, but I'm not the
Oscar
biggest
worthy.
Shrek fan. I don't like hate it or anything, but I do kind of I don't appreciate the influence that it had on animation as a whole. And also the influence that it had over DreamWorks. There was a point where they could have gone sort of the Prince of Egypt kind of more ambitious, more artistic, interesting route, but that's not the thing that took off. And what took off, of course, was Shrek. And so that just changed the whole course of animation and changed the whole course of DreamWorks.
Well,
but obviously they wouldn't know that then in 2001. I just think that Monsters Inc. I think the animation is a lot better. I think that the camaraderie between Mike and Sully is very charming, and it's a nice story of friendship. I think it's in my opinion funnier because I think that a lot of the parody in Shrek, like it's funny the first time you hear it, but like it doesn't really hold up to me on like multiple viewings. Which I think Monsters Inc. holds up better. I don't know, I just think it's a stronger film than Shrek. But obviously, Shrek was a phenomenon at the time, and it is kind of nice that I guess DreamWorks at least had one win.
Yeah,
so,
I'm actually on the same page with you there. I personally preferred Monsters Inc. As a film, but I recognized kind of the juggernaut that was Shrek, and it's like, well, you okay?
Yeah, so I feel Shrek is a better film. I understand what you're saying, Rachel, how like it had a monstrously bad influence on animation, but I always have to kind of almost separate the product because South Park also had a demonstrably bad influence on adult animation, where basically every primetime animated show since then is trying to be, edgy and adult, and it's like, but South Park is funny because it's intelligent. It's not because the kids were cursing. So sometimes the wrong lessons are taken from success. And I remember how unique Shrek was, and it was clever. I liked it. Even had like almost a good message, like, hey, it was like the overweight guy who wasn't perfect, but he was nice, and he, that's, and like, and when she turns into the ogre and she's like, I thought I would be beautiful. And he's like, you are beautiful. Like there was almost some real progressiveness to Shrek at the time that we weren't getting from Disney or even Pixar. So I totally understand it. Of course, then you saw like Happily Never After, and how many fairy tale spoofs films did we get after that? Like, I mean, it did have a bad influence, but I personally understand that Shrek. But from my opinion, this inaugural...
There were a lot of clones of sort of the donkey character.
Yes.
There were a lot of clones of, but I tell you, maybe a surprise, something I do absolutely love that's Shrek related is Shrek the Musical. I think it is it is the gold standard of that kind of transfer of animated comedy, whatever, to the stage. It is so funny, and the songs are so good.
Yep. Now this is a side tangent, but I kind of had this idea fairly recently because we know that they're making a Shrek 5 and they want to do a semi-reboot. What if the semi-reboot involves Puss in Boots and Friends visiting Shrek. The kids are a little older. It looks
Uh-huh.
just like the first Shrek movie, but the kids want to know how mommy and daddy met, and they tell them the story of how they met as Shrek the Musical with slightly different animation style. How's that a way to semi-reboot the franchise without redoing everything?
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
It's
Who knows what they'll do?
I was shocked how much I liked it when I saw
Yeah.
it. I wasn't expecting to really enjoy it that much, and it was so good.
Oh yeah, Who I'd Be is such a great musical number,
Yeah.
as is Welcome to Duloc. So
The Lord Farquaad is hilarious in that musical.
I saw so that special on Netflix, I actually saw the show live with that exact cast.
Really?
So I am
wow.
so glad that they captured it for all time, because especially the guy who played Lord Farquaad, he was so good in that.
Yeah.
So my opinion of the inaugural award is like, well, growing pains. I do think that Shrek would have been a Best Picture nominee had they not known this category was coming out, because, you know, when you get to the screenplay stage, you're probably going to get a little bit farther. And so I feel the right first film won. It was overall rough. I could think of a couple other movies that should have been nominated, but there was also one more thing about this inaugural thing. Even though I personally feel that Shrek is an adult movie, a lot of people don't for some reason. I think it's an adult movie. They saw this category, and the first set of nominees were
jokes.
A lot of raunchy jokes, but the first three nominees are technically family films, which I think that makes for an interesting first impression, because people looked at this and like, oh, so this is going to be a kids category then.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering if having at least one more adult, especially as opposed to Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. But let's look at the second.
Yeah, they could have nominated Waking Life.
Yeah, they could have nominated Waking Life. That would have been better than Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius.
Yeah.
Now the second year, actually, I thought was a lot closer to what the award could be. The nominees that year were Ice Age, Lilo and Stitch, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, Treasure Planet, and eventual winner, Spirited Away. Now, first of all, this is the only year where an anime has won Best Animated Feature, and it went to a director who is actually known within the animation community. So this was like the first year where it's like, okay, it's kind of becoming what I want it to be, a way to recognize animation legends and great films. But also in this category, you have a mixture of family movies that aim a little older and movies that aim a little younger. So I don't know. What do you two think about the second year?
Well, I remember when I think it was Ebert and Roper were reviewing this Spirited Away, and I remember Ebert saying that if it didn't win Best Animated Feature, that the category was a joke. And I have to say I agree with him. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's an incredible film. And so, yeah, I mean, that was the reason I found out about it, was because of that review that Ebert gave of it. And yeah, it's amazing. And I just saw the Spirited Away live on stage, and that was an incredible experience.
Seeing it tonight at 7.
It's great.
Yep. So what do you think about this lineup, Tracy? And have you seen Spirited Away?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
I mean, I don't watch that much anime, but I have seen Spirited Away and, several other Miyazaki films. And yeah, absolutely. The right film won this time. I don't think there's much debate about that. Lilo and Stitch, obviously a lot of people love Lilo and Stitch. I love Lilo and Stitch. Spirit is pretty. Treasure Planet is fun, but I know it didn't do so well with critics or audiences. Ice Age, it's fun, but it's not.
Yeah. That one's of the 5, that one's probably aged the worst.
Yeah.
It's I mean, although I had to say, when I saw that movie, one of my thoughts was like, Ray Romano literally does sound like a cartoon character.
Yeah, he does. I mean, it's a good voice.
I think it's interesting because I think Ice Age is very similar to Monsters, Inc. It has all the same plot points of these kind of monster type creatures finding a baby and having to take care of the baby, and
Yeah. The baby looked terrible, by the way. Even back then, the baby looked terrible. Terrible.
Yeah.
Like
we were still working on humans back then.
Yeah.
Everyone's complaining about Disney sticking with their kind of, same designs for human characters, but it's like it took them a long time to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, this was the interesting year because this was the year where it's like, okay, and I agree with Roger Ebert. Like, I think if Spirited Away didn't win this award, I don't think anyone would have even hoped to take this category seriously. But because it did, and Spirited Away probably should have been a Best Picture nominee as well.
Yeah.
We were able to take the award seriously. And then something really interesting started to happen starting in 2003. It's like we basically saw Pixar go on a winning spree. Like, they started winning for Finding Nemo, The Incredibles. They take a year off, and Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit wins.
2 years.
And then they make Cars, and that one's not that good, so they give it to Happy Feet instead. Believe it or not, I think that actually keeps the award with integrity so far, because so far, Finding Nemo probably is better than, well, it is better than Brother Bear, and it's probably better than The Triplets of Belleville. The Incredibles, definitely better than Shark Tale, probably better than Shrek 2.
Some of these nominees.
Yep. Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, I can say without reservation that Howl's are better than Corpse Bride and Howl's Moving Castle. And then when Pixar kind of slums it a little bit, they lose to Happy Feet. And then they start winning again with Ratatouille and WALL-E and Up.
Monster House is kind of an interesting nominee because it was the motion capture, and then they would claim that the reason why Tintin didn't get nominated was because it was motion capture,
right.
But they technically already nominated a film that's motion capture, so that's that's an interesting one.
Yep. Now, yeah, and I would have personally picked Monster House, but Happy Feet is better than Cars, that's for sure. And even though Persepolis was really interesting and would have been a good winner too, Ratatouille was really good, and WALL-E should have been a Best Picture nominee. Now, what's interesting about Up winning is that actually did get a Best Picture nominee after the Best Picture nominations were expanded to 10, and once that got nominated there, it wasn't going to beat Coraline, it wasn't going to beat Fantastic Mr. Fox, it wasn't going to beat The Princess and the Frog, and it wasn't going to beat The Secret of the Kells.
But that was an incredible year for animation.
That was an incredible.
All of those movies are so good.
All of those movies are great. I honestly don't know which one I'd pick. Maybe I would pick Up. I don't know, but that one's a really, really tough one. But the thing is, no one thought much about Pixar's little winning spree because you could really argue these were the best of the field. Now, for me personally, the 2010s is where things start getting really strange.
Yeah.
We're gonna see if I'm the lone one. I have a very unpopular opinion. I do not think Toy Story 3 is that good.
Oh.
I think Toy Story 3 has a brilliant beginning and a brilliant end. And for that reason, I would recommend it. But when people talk about how great Toy Story 3 is, it's like, shut up. You're talking about the beginning and you're talking about the end. All that stuff with the babysitter the daycare in the middle, all the stuff with lots of loving, lots of hugging bear and whatever. Nobody ever talks about that. They talk about the beginning and the end. That's because the middle stuff is not that interesting. When Ken's doing that little dress change up sequence, it doesn't even feel like a Pixar movie at that point. I do not think Toy Story 3 should have been nominated here.
But well, so now I tell you that I think that it is an absolute crime that Tangled wasn't nominated. And I've seen The Illusionist, and it's not that good. I think that it's
would Tangled have been up?
Tangled.
Would Tangled have been up for this year or the previous year?
No, it would have been that year, and I think Tangled was better than Toy Story 3.
Oh, I would have,
Now, How to Train Your Dragon and The Illusionist were better than Tangled, but Toy Story 3 should not have been in the conversation. That's my thing. I felt
like The Illusionist kept its character at a distance from it. Even the way that it was animated, I didn't feel like I really got to know him very well, and so it just wasn't that interesting to me. Whereas like Tangled is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. I love it.
So. Okay, well,
It should have at least been in there.
Tangled should have been in there. I don't know, Tracy. What do you think about Toy Story 3?
I like Toy Story 3.
And for the record, I do too. It's just not to the extent that people do.
I did not have a problem with it winning. I have to be honest that I haven't seen The Illusionist.
Oh, that's
obviously, I need to.
That's a very good movie.
Not great.
And I like How to Train Your Dragon, but I did not have a problem with Toy Story 3 winning over it.
So yeah, I think How to Train Your Dragon had way more imagination and heart, and unlike Toy Story 3, it was consistently memorable, not just for a couple key scenes. It was like it worked as a really good movie on a whole. That's my. I think The Illusionist is the strongest of the three. And Rachel, you're the only person I know who has ever seen that movie who has said, "I don't like it." Everyone I've shown it to, and in all fairness, people I show it to are usually surprised that there's a sophisticated adult animated film that they're watching. But
no, I didn't love it.
They've all loved it.
Nope. But Toy Story 3, I don't agree with you on that one. I think that it's a very entertaining prison escape movie throughout the film. I think Lotso is a super intimidating villain. He's actually scary, whereas so few villains these days actually are scary, which I appreciate. I do think that it gets a little over the top with the incinerator scene. It's like, okay, like, it's a little much, I think. But other than that,
if you want a great escape animated movie, I'd recommend Chicken Run personally. But
I really love that too.
Which by the way, it's rumored that Chicken Run was actually the catalyst for this category because they thought that would get a Best Picture nominee in 2000, and when it didn't,
that's what I thought of too. Yeah.
So that might have been the catalyst for all of this. So yeah, anyway, I know that I am a rarity in that one, but I think you'll agree with me a little bit more going forward. Now, the next year, Pixar takes a year off, and really Disney takes a year off in general. And so Rango wins, which very surprised that it's a Nickelodeon film, by the way. You know, and it beats movies like A Cat in Paris, Chico and Rita, Kung Fu Panda 2, Puss in Boots. And this was the year where it was like, I was kind of wondering, like, is this the turning point for the award? Is this where the independents and the adult films start coming in more often? Because even Rango, despite being a kid's film, supposedly, I don't think that's a kid's film.
Mm-hmm. I don't love Rango. In fact, it's kind of funny that year that when I did the right film win for 2011, I said I didn't like Rango, and there's a couple of people, particularly one who I swear once a month ever since, I mean, this has been years, I get a comment from him about how I should like Rango. I'm like, I admire your dedication.
I get this Super guy fans. Commenting on my channel every several months because on my Disney rankings video, I like Frozen more than Treasure Planet. Like, I'm sorry. Sorry. It is. So
this year I would have picked Cat in Paris. I love that. I think that's a really good movie. Beautiful animation.
I probably would have picked Chico and Rita. Tracy, which one of you have picked?
Not Rango. But I can understand why it got picked.
And it's also cool that Gore Verbinski won an Oscar for that too.
Yeah.
Well, and it was like peak Johnny Depp.
Yeah, it's it's different, time. And that's cool. Out of the ones that I've seen, which I have to say I haven't seen Chico and Rita, I really liked Kung Fu Panda 2, honestly.
That's a good one.
Yep, that's a good one too.
I mean, DreamWorks tends to hit it out of the park on sequels, and
one of the rare animated films to have a female director.
Yes, I actually think this was the first time that a sole female director got nominated for this award.
Yeah.
So if memory serves. So and it's fun to see Puss in Boots there because it was like, oh man, if the second one had come out during this year, I think that would have been no contest.
That would have been a slam dunk.
Yeah. But then this is where things get really weird. I mean, I started with Toy Story 3 because I felt that was a pretty average film, and it's like, well, they're giving the award to reward the trilogy and things like that. But then it's like when you start noticing things that are really off. Like the following year, some of the nominees were for Frankenweenie. That's a unique film. Paranorman, definitely different.
Love
The
that.
Pirates and an Adventure with Scientists. Not my favorite, but unique. Wreck-It Ralph, that was a lot of fun. And they gave them the award to Brave, Pixar's least engaging film since Cars.
Yes, here's my unpopular opinion. I don't love Wreck-It Ralph. It's okay. Well, I don't love it, especially once they get to Sugar Rush. I think it's very conventional.
It gets more conventional when they get to Sugar Rush, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I just think it's very overrated as far as Disney films. I don't hate it. I just don't think it's that great. And out of these ones, I would pick Paranorman. I think it's my favorite of these groups.
I'd pick Frankenweenie. What do you think, Tracy?
I would probably, if I was going to pick one, I'd go with it wouldn't be Brave. Let's say that. I think any of them except for Brave would have been a better choice. But personally, Wreck-It Ralph would have been my pick.
Okay. Well, I like Wreck-It Ralph.
Is this has been the Academy has repeatedly honored stop motion animation. They love like Aardman and Laika
but then they never give them the awards.
They except for Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah, Wallace and Gromit.
But yeah,
and Pinocchio.
Pinocchio this year. They love highlighting stop motion, so that's kind of cool.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Right. And but then you see things just continue to get weirder. Now, the next year, Frozen won, and to all the viewers out there, yes, Frozen is better than Tangled. Frozen is a classic. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. That said,
I disagree.
Ernest and Celestine and The Wind Rises were much better films. Ernest and Celestine and The Wind Rises were much better films. I think the reason Frozen won was because it was kind of that juggernaut status, and Disney themselves had never won this award.
I don't agree. I do think Frozen is the best of this group, but I understand.
Better than Ernest and Celestine.
I love Ernest and Celestine. I do, but I do think Frozen is a better film.
I love Ernest and Celestine, but the kind of moral of it lost me a little bit towards the end. When they're in the courtroom scene and they're saying like, we didn't do anything wrong but love each other, and I'm like, actually you robbed a store.
Yeah.
Like you did some other things. This isn't just you're being persecuted for your love for each other.
Mm-hmm. Did you know that there's a sequel coming out this year?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Looking forward to it. Although no Forrest Whitaker as Ernest, I guess so. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Now for the record, again, so I gave Frozen 5 stars. I gave The Wind Rises 4 stars. I gave Ernest and Celestine 5 stars. So this is a pretty strong year. So it's kind of like out of all of those 5-star movies,
yeah.
I guess Frozen, I think it's just the impact that Frozen had.
I didn't
see it as it should have gotten this award.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but then the next year,
it's weird.
Like this is BS. I'm not going to defend the box trolls too much, but you have How to Train Your Dragon 2, Song of the Sea, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya.
Yeah. 3
very unique, very unorthodox animated films that really stretch the art form of animation to new heights, whether it be through animation style, story, or 3D effects. And they gave it to Big Hero 6, the movie that should have been nominated.
I love Song of the Sea. It's one of my literally one of my favorite movies. So I wish that had won. I just wish that one of Tom Moore's movies had won. I mean, wait till we talk about Wolfwalkers, but I think it's way better than Soul. But I just love Song of the Sea. I think it's such a beautiful movie, both animation and story and music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By the way, folks, we have to remember the Lego Movie wasn't nominated for this award, and that was a pretty good movie.
Yeah, that is wild.
For it to just be completely left out was crazy.
Well, it did get a song nomination. It did get a Best Song nomination, which is hilarious because I don't think people realize that song was a joke. I really
But it was a
don't,
good
but
joke.
It was a good joke.
It was a very catchy joke.
It was
Yeah.
bizarre that didn't
Tracy-
get nominated.
Tracy, what do you think of the? See, this is
This
where
is
for me
such-
the animated feature category started to become very suspicious to me, because it's like at this point they had now given 3 very average films to Disney and Pixar when I felt there were clearly better categories. And even though a lot of people disagree with me on Toy Story, most people say, yeah, Brave was not that great. And most people are like, yeah, Big Hero 6 was fine. What do you think about Big
I
Hero
mean,
6?
there's a point at which it starts to feel like the people voting are just, probably haven't seen all the movies and they're just saying, well, this was a Disney, this was a Pixar. I'm sure it's good.
Yep. It was actually this win that got like Variety and Deadline to start quizzing Academy members anonymously about the animated feature category, and a lot of the voters at that point started admitting, yeah, we let our kids pick.
My kids liked it. And I like Big Hero 6, but this is an interesting group of movies this year. And
yeah, for it to go to Big Hero 6.
It feels weird. It definitely, Song of the Sea, I would probably, or even How to Train Your Dragon 2, or I don't know, any of them could have taken it, I think.
I think if this had been more of the streaming era, I think that Song of the Sea would have had a pretty good chance, because I know it got a lot of exposure being on Amazon Prime and then being on Netflix and everything like that. And so it seems like it just kind of missed that, like people had to go to the theater, kind of missed that wave. I mean, for me, Big Hero 6 would be my 3rd favorite of this 5. I do really love Baymax. I think he's a great character, and I think there is a lot of heart with Hero and his brother and all of that. But
but when you say Oscar winner, it's like that's kind of a weak one.
It's not a bad movie. It's just
it's not a bad movie.
Best movie.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, it's not like a bad movie like the Ultimate Cheeseburger at Jack in the Box is not a bad burger until you give it like a Michigan star, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, is it that good?
I mean,
yeah.
I remember being surprised by this one.
Now, I did pick Inside Out as the best film of the year on my top 10 list, so I'm not complaining too much that won, even though it should have been a Best Picture nominee. But then, of course, it's one of those things like, oh, another Pixar movie, and you're passing up really interesting stuff like Anomalisa and Boy in the World. And when Marnie were there, Shaun the Sheep movie was kind of normal, but still pretty funny.
It's so cute. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think this year though does showcase what this award has done, because there is no way anybody would have heard of Boy in the World, or Anomalisa if it hadn't been nominated. I think
that's true.
At least they're getting a seat at the table.
Yeah.
But and again, Inside Out was great. But then we go to the next year, and Kubo and the Two Strings. That's a really good movie. Moana, that's pretty good. My Life as a Zucchini. It says courgette, but it was like My Life as a Zucchini in America. That was really interesting. The Red Turtle, a Studio Ghibli film, joining. Like, really, what about Zootopia was better than these movies? It's like, it's Disney, so they have the biggest marketing clout again. And so that's why this was around. I think Brave was around the time it kind of started chain reaction where you see all these Pixar and Pixar films winning, but with the exception of a couple of them, they weren't great. I don't know.
I like Zootopia quite a bit. Moana would be my pick out of this group. I really love that film. But I do also appreciate Kubo and Two Strings. My Life as a Courgette is not my favorite. It was just too heavy-handed for my taste. But the Red Turtle is absolutely stunning, beautiful. I think that Moana is the strongest of these 5 films.
Out of the 2 Disneys in here, I would have taken Zootopia. I prefer it to Moana. And I think it addresses some very relevant themes. And I think at the time, especially, that was a big reason that it won, maybe, is because it felt very relevant.
But the one that I really resent that wasn't nominated, that I would put over any of these, is Your Name, which is
yes, and
incredible.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it almost didn't feel like a fair race without Your Name being in there.
And I wish that they had not done the last minute Oscar push in 2016, because it didn't come out in the United States until 2017. And I wish that they had just waited, because I think 2017 is a way weaker year than 2016. And it would have, I just have to believe that it would have beaten Boss Baby.
Well, that's an interesting question, because I don't know if you two are aware of this, but there was a change made to the category after 2016. See, up until now, the Best Animated Feature category, the nominees were by a specialized voting group, aka animators. Now, Disney lobbied and had been lobbying hard for that to change. They wanted everyone in the Academy to be able to pick the nominees for Best Animated Feature. And after starting in 2017, they got their wish. And what happens when you open it up? You start seeing things like The Boss Baby and Ferdinand getting nominated for Best Animated Feature. And Coco winning, which, good movie, but...
And they could have nominated A Silent Voice in 2017.
They could have nominated A Silent Voice.
Which is
the breadwinner is sitting right there to win.
It's that anime bias.
Especially because now that you've opened it up to all the members, most of these Academy members don't even watch American animated films, much less foreign animated films. I mean, they'll appreciate loving Vincent and the breadwinner because they're artistic, and especially in the case of the breadwinner, it has something to say. But in what universe is Ferdinand and the Boss Baby Oscar worthy?
I like Ferdinand way better than Boss Baby, but that year
we're just not saying much.
Silent Voice, which is such a beautiful movie.
Oh yeah, A Silent Voice was on my top 10 list that year, and why is that not there? Now, thankfully, the Academy woke up a little bit in 2018, and they gave a truly artistic movie Best Animated Feature, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And they finally did nominate another anime, Mirai.
Yeah.
But then you see the same old shtick. Incredibles 2, which was not better than the first movie. Ralph Breaks the Internet, which I actually think is probably the worst Disney movie since Robin Hood, or Home on the Range, I should say. It's pretty bad.
I don't agree.
And Isle of the Dogs is it's good, but they're nominated because they know who Wes Anderson is. It was not as strong as Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, it's not Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah. So
Ralph Breaks the Internet is really the most egregious one here.
It's awful. It's like I had never seen a Disney movie that had dated itself so quickly. I actually wrote this in my review, and people kind of cringe, but I think they know what I'm getting at. Where it's like in Frozen. Watching a movie like Frozen is like watching Disney create memories and magic and timelessness. Watching a movie like Ralph Breaks the Internet is like watching Disney masturbate. Because that was what that movie was. We own Star Wars. We own the princesses. We own Winnie the Pooh. We own Marvel. Look at how big we are.
Granted, the princess scene was one of the more fun scenes in that movie, but...
Yeah, it was, but it still was like...
I don't agree, but that's another topic for another
whole episode.
I love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I think it is an absolute masterpiece and one of my favorite movies of all time.
That was one of those where it was like, that was like too good that even the Academy couldn't avoid it. But then they do it again. Toy Story 4 beats How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World, I Lost My Body, Klaus, Missing Link. How did Klaus not win this Oscar?
Klaus.
Yeah, I would have picked Klaus. I do really enjoy Toy Story 4 more than most people, it seems like. But yeah, Klaus was just so great.
I actually like Toy Story 4 better than Toy Story 3, but it was kind of like, come on, this is another, and at this point it's happened like 5 times. Like,
it really just feels like the voters saw the name Toy Story and just said, oh, yes, of course, that's what you vote for.
Right. And And they kind of do it again. Now, I like Soul quite a bit, but it was not as good as Wolfwalkers. Although this was kind of like a weak year in general, because Onward probably shouldn't have been nominated. The Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon, it's cute, but not great. Over the Moon, pretty average. That was when the theaters were closed, so the pickings were kind of slim.
Yeah, I just think that Soul, it's beautiful. I love the music, but once he turns into a cat, the movie loses me, and I just don't think it doesn't work very well. But Wolfwalkers is just consistently great from beginning to end, and they literally invented a new form of animation with the way that there's the overlay of the wolf vision, they call it, with the gold and the way that the animation moves and flows. And I just think that they deserve to win. It was the best movie of this group.
Yeah. I felt that Wolfwalkers actually felt like a Disney film that Disney would have made in the 90s, with the classic villain and the transforming into an animal and learning the other side. I thought that it was a movie Disney might have made in the 90s, personally. I don't know, Tracy, what do you think of this particular year?
I'm with you guys. I would probably give it to Wolfwalkers. I mean, Soul is a good movie. I didn't dislike it.
Yeah, I still recommended
I liked it a lot,
but I thought it was messy.
Yeah, and I like Onward too, but I don't
like Onward. I actually don't like
Onward. But again, one thing that's been disappointing is I thought when Pete Docter took over, it was going to be like a really exciting time for Pixar because he had made such great films. But pretty much since he came out, he took over. Almost every single film has been very messy, and I just feel like they have lost the clean stories that they had for so long. And maybe some people that excites them. But for me, I just usually find it frustrating.
Well, keep in mind, a lot of Pete Docter's best films were overseen by Lasseter, and Lasseter would recommend change. I mean, people don't want to give Lasseter credit because they think he's a creep or something like that, or they don't like hearing how he removed this director and put this person in place. And but yeah, that's what a producer does. Jeffrey Katzenberg did that.
That's what I'm saying, that I thought that Pete Docter taking over at Pixar, it was going to be really exciting. We're going to get some really great films. But in my opinion, it's been mixed, pretty much every single one.
Well, I think Pete Docter is a director and a writer, but he's not a producer. And Lasseter could be a producer. And
I agree.
That's why. Although I did really like Soul personally, but I would have given it to Wolfwalkers. And we're getting near the end now. 2021. Now this. If this were not a family-friendly show, we would call this year an S show, because this thing was handled completely wrong. And
you mean the present of the award?
On a number of things. First of all, Raya and the Last Dragon should not be there. Encanto was nowhere near as good as Flea or The Mitchells versus the Machines. Lucas was, I guess fine. And then after all these years of people saying that this is basically the Disney award and everything, this was like the biggest insult. Because not only did Encanto seem to just automatically win, even though it's funny, everyone was saying, oh yeah, Flea and Mitchells versus the Machines, these are much better movies, but Encanto's going to win because it's Disney. Like, at this point, the reputation had been made kind of solid. This is the Disney category. But then what did they do to present the award? I'm not even talking about like that sketch where they're saying like they suggested that animated films were movies that kids liked while adults endured. But they got 3 of the actresses who played live action versions of the Disney princesses as if, movies that are only successful because of the animated features. And they have them come up, make fun of animation. And it was basically a way of Disney saying, yep, we make these live now, so don't worry about the cartoons. This was the worst. This was the lowest point for the award, in my opinion. So I know everyone's got a lot of opinions on this one. So let's actually start with Tracy this time.
Okay.
Well, I haven't seen Flea. I have to say that right up front. So
it's on Hulu, so you can see it.
I wouldn't have nominated Raya, but I'm curious who else you would put in that spot. I don't know who else was up this year.
Yeah.
I like Luca. I really like Luca, but as a, sweet, cute little movie, not as an Oscar winner. So then it comes down to Encanto and Mitchell's versus the Machines. I'm working on the Encanto episode for my podcast right now.
Oh, yay.
And I'm
I'm looking
talking
forward.
it up.
Might as
Encanto
well.
it's actually the
Belle. That's what
podcast.
I would swap Ryan the Last Dragon out for Belle.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Or Ron's Gone Wrong, I think it's actually really good. I
like
that.
Ron's Gone Wrong. I don't know if I would nominate it for an Oscar, but it is a good movie. But I actually prefer Encanto to Mitchell's versus the Machines. That said, I recognize why Mitchell's versus the Machines is so beloved by the animation community, and the fact that it's doing new things and doing interesting things, and I do enjoy the movie. I just enjoy Encanto more.
Yeah.
And I do think it, I think it was worthy of an Oscar.
Yes, I don't know if it was worthy of that particular Oscar. I do like Encanto. I mean, I have to keep pointing out that I do like some of these movies. It's just become glaringly obvious the problem with the award once you really start breaking it down. Like, especially Flea. Like, Flea was nominated for animated film, documentary, and international film. And they couldn't seem fit to give it one of them.
Yeah.
Yep. And the fact that Raya and the Last Dragon is there and Belle isn't, there are 3 Disney movies here. And no wonder Disney felt so comfortable strutting out their live action princesses and basically going like, we make the movies. Yeah. I don't know. What do you okay, Rachel, what do you think of these?
Well, I do think Belle is another one that I wish they had waited until it got its US release, because I think then it would have done, so it would have been in the running this year as opposed to 2021. But
Hosoda is the only other non-Ghibli guy to get an Oscar nomination in this category.
I absolutely love Belle. That would be my top pick out of these. But I love it. I do love Encanto. I think it's great. I love the story and the extended family, and I love the songs, and I think it's great. Flea, I really admire. I really love it. I don't think it seems like of the 3 awards it was up for, I would think animation would be the least one, I think, just because I don't think the animation is like that great, but the story is wonderful.
Right.
And Luca, I love, actually. I think it's one of the stronger recent Pixar films. Mitchell's versus the Machines, though, out of these 5 would be my pick. And I've said it many times that I think that Raya and the Last Dragon would have been much better as a musical. And that's unpopular opinion. But I just think it has all the spots for music.
I think Raya and the Last Dragon would have been better with a villain, like a true villain. Instead of like forcing in this, like, well, she's not really bad. It's like, why? She's been nothing but bad. I wouldn't trust her.
Let her be bad.
You can't like overthink sort of the trust metaphor. You just have to kind of accept it on face value. It's okay. I don't love Raya. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, definitely nothing compared to Belle. Ridiculous. But out of these, I didn't mind that Encanto won, but I would pick Mitchell's vs. Machines. I think it's just the animation is so beautiful and it's such a great story and great characters. I actually interviewed the director, Mike Randa, and so I also feel tied to it, I guess. But yeah, it was an interesting year, pretty good year. I mean, that's the one thing. Animation just keeps growing as a medium, and I think that Spider-Verse really is a big reason that that I think it's changed animation quite a bit, and it was a big touch point, I think, for the medium.
Yeah.
Yep. And that brings us to our current year, where I actually feel like this was a much needed correction. Maybe this is where like a new turn for the category is going to take place, because Disney did not dominate. Like, if this had been previous years, it's like, well, Strange World is getting nominated, Lightyear is getting nominated, Turning Red is getting nominated, but only Turning Red got nominated. The movies nominated were Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, The Sea Beast, Turning Red, and the eventual winner Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and I mean, really, I'd probably switch the Sea Beast out for either Wendell and Wild or Charlotte, but for the most part, that's a really good lineup. And something that we haven't discussed before is, when all these previous movies win, the people come up on stage and they talk about how great animation is and that animation is cinema and things like that, but nobody takes them seriously because they're animators. Of course, they're going to say that, but this time, Guillermo del Toro, this is an undisputed great director. He has made quote unquote real movies. He has directed a Best Picture winner. And for him to be getting this award and coming up and championing that animation is cinema, I thought that was like a sharp turn from the previous year. And so I'm going to say it right now. I think this year with this win, I believe the best animated feature category has felt the most legitimate it has in the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you ladies think? And I know we love Puss in Boots, but I mean, I'm kind of, I'm feeling like it was a really good statement to have like a filmmaker that people knew,
yes,
and whose work they had been familiar with, and he comes up stage and he says things like,
"Oh yeah,
Pinocchio is not a kids movie, but kids can watch it," and it's like animation is cinema.
It did the Right One Win video for this year. That's one of the things I say, that I only really enjoyed Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I thought it was some of the best stop motion I have ever seen in my life, but that I was happy that he won because he was such an ambassador to the medium, and that made me very happy. So I had no problem with him winning. I love Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. It's a very special movie to me, and I loved Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I just so admired them for pushing the boundaries when they did not have to at all. And I think that's incredible. Sea Beast I thought was cute. I enjoyed it. And then Turning Red, I'm not a big fan of. So.
This sounds very, I agree. I think, this win for being Del Toro and him getting up there and saying what he said was important for the category to get more respect and to, get people to pay attention to it. And this was just a really strong year for animation. There were several other, ones that you could have switched out, even though Disney and Pixar did not have a great year. Strange World and Lightyear were both duds and deserve to be duds.
Yep.
But Marcel was great, and I had a personal, made me cry. Puss in Boots, I know there were a lot of Puss in Boots fans that were upset that Pinocchio won, but they were both great.
So I'm gonna say, even though there was like a lot of back and forth which one would win, and I actually would like to see DreamWorks win another one of these awards at some point, and Puss in Boots was their strongest case yet. I think when Del Toro won the award, I actually think it's kind of like, for the sake of this award and for this medium to be taken more seriously by the Academy, Pinocchio had to win. If Joel Crawford and Mark Swift had gotten up on stage, and I'm not saying anything, they're probably wonderful people, but if they get on stage and they say animation cinema and we love this, no one would have taken them seriously. It would have been just more animators pretty much giving themselves a boost. But to have like a real ambassador in Guillermo del Toro, it was like, I think it's the most significant award that has been given out in this category since Spirited Away.
Also the first win in this category for a streamer, so that was significant.
Yes, Netflix finally got one of their Oscars for this category. Yes, I mean, that does mean that unfortunately I can't put it on my Oscar shelves, but So, all right, we have basically gone through these categories, the various films, the various snubs. So now comes the moment of truth as we wrap this up. Has the best animated feature category accomplished what it set out to do? Has it been good for animation? Has it been good for getting people to respect animation a little bit more? Rachel, what say you?
I think so. I mean, you could really go through every single category and be like, oh, that was questionable, and why did that win? And I mean, like I was saying about the documentary, is very suspect every year, and so I don't think that it's that much worse than almost any other category as far as the nominees and the wins. And I do think it has been a way of introducing people to smaller studios and smaller animated films, stop motion animated films, things like that, that they would never have heard of or seen. So I think that alone, it's worth. I mean, how many people are going to see a movie like I Lost My Body, or like just some of these obscure kind of movies that because it's nominated, it gets a platform. So I think for that, it's worth it. And yeah, it's not a perfect solution. I wish that we could see more Best Picture nominees. Like I said, I think almost every year there's an animated film that deserves to be in the discussion, but it's just not. Oh. So yeah, not perfect. I wish my Makoto Shinkai would have a nomination at this point, but it doesn't. But yeah, it's the Oscars. It's a very imperfect system and award. So
Tracy. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. I think of it a bit as like, you get invited to holiday dinner, but you have to sit at the kiddie table. And sometimes it's treated as the kiddie table, as lesser than the real movies. But I would rather be invited and get to sit at the kiddie table than not get to sit anywhere, not be invited at all. Or to say, well, once in a while we might have an opening at the adult table, but everyone else that's at the kiddie table would just get rid of the kiddie table altogether. Yep. And they are recognizing some movies that are not just kiddie movies. We can, we'll, as animation fans, quibble all day about who should have won or who should not have won, but at least some other movies are getting some recognition, like Rachel said, that maybe would not be on people's radar otherwise.
I feel the category has largely failed. I think by letting Disney and Pixar dominate this category for the most part, especially during years where they really shouldn't have, I think they made the award very pointless for a very long time. And in fact, here's the really interesting thing. I know that Disney puts a lot of money into winning this award every year, and yet they never advertise that their films win this award. They never do, which makes me suspect of why does Disney even want to win this award other than to keep the award from other people? Because when you see, for example, the Blu-ray of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, it says clearly winner of the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film. You don't see that on Frozen's cover. You don't see that on Toy Story 3. You don't see that on anything. And so I think the award has largely failed, but it has succeeded in some ways. Certain names do keep popping up, and so people are now more aware that Hayao Miyazaki and Wes Anderson are animation directors, or at least they make animation. Those names are a little bit more well-known now. And I do believe that with this last year, it showed that a legitimate filmmaker is there. And for the first time in a long time, when I read the post-Oscar articles, most of the time the animated feature is like, oh, Disney won again for Best Animated Feature. And this time they actually not only wrote that Guillermo del Toro won the Oscar, but they mentioned what he said. So I'm hoping that this is a turning point. In all fairness, these awards take time to legitimize themselves. When the Best Animated Short category was introduced, it was introduced with the same goal in mind. And then Walt Disney based and Tom and Jerry cartoons won for 30 years or so before more interesting films started winning. So I think the category has largely failed, but it's still technically in its infancy. I guess after 35 years, we'll see where this goes, because that's how long it kind of took for animated short to legitimize itself. I don't know. What do y'all think of that opinion?
Like I said, I can see why, but I also feel like almost any other category is is murky as far as if you're just looking at results of who won. Almost any other category is as questionable. It's just it's the Oscars.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of politics there, and but the industry, seems like it's really revitalized. I feel like especially since Spider-Verse, and there's a lot more competition against, it's not just Disney and Pixar that are out there anymore. They're not even being seen as the best at what this is. Everyone else is pushing the envelope, which is great. And hopefully we'll see more recognition of that.
Yep.
And I think the streaming is going to continue to make a huge difference, because you're going to be hard pressed to get most people to go see a movie like Marcel the Shell with Shoes On at the theater, or something like Flea at the theater. But if they can see it on streaming, they're way more likely to, click that and watch it, I think, than. And so I think in particular this category, I think is particularly going to be helped by that. So.
Yeah. And hey, you know what? Illumination is creating a new studio for adult animated features. So that could be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Well,
we'll see what happens.
Like take some of that Mario money and make an adult animated feature film. So obviously we are celebrating Mario making $1 billion. I don't think that's the greatest movie in the world, but you know what? Any movie that is successful enough to get Universal to go from having already announced the streaming and DVD release date to saying, yeah, it's delayed indefinitely.
Oh, did they do that? I
was
just thinking the other day, they need to delay it.
Yeah, they've delayed it indefinitely, and it's like, you know what? That is great for the movie theater. So when things like that happen. So
I'm happy for win for theatrical. I didn't love the movie, but
I didn't love the movie either. And as someone who does his hypothetical voice acting Oscars every year, there has never been an animated movie that I've wanted to recast more than this one. Although I don't know why Chris Pratt got so much flack when Seth Rogen was clearly the worst.
Because people just hate Chris Pratt for being Chris Pratt.
He's fine.
I thought that voice acting was fine.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with that.
I just thought the script was weak.
Yeah, no, it wasn't gonna.
To me, it was just what a Mario movie needed to be, which was fluffy fun. Instead of what we got in the 90s.
That was definitely bad. And people who don't like this one, who go back like, oh, the 90s wasn't great, but at least it was interesting. It's like, no, it was bad. It was bad.
No.
It wasn't even bad in an interesting sort of way. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining me, ladies. And for everyone who's watching this, we're kind of curious. What do you think of this award? What were some of your snubs? Do you disagree with any of our takes? And what do you think about the future of the award? Do you think it has a bright future? We would love to know. You can comment below. You can subscribe to any of our channels. You can see the channel names on the screen. And thank you once again, ladies, for joining me. And I will see everyone next time on the next episode of iCritic Live. Take care.